invitation. So it's always nice to be invited. I never take things for granted, and I appreciate the interest. So hopefully, I'll give you some insights and the information that people are looking for. Yeah, obviously out here in Las Vegas, working at the Ufc Performance Institute. It's a 30,000 square feet high performance, world-class performance facility that is situated on the headquarters, the world headquarters of the UFC. We opened on May 22nd of 2017, so just coming up on our 12-month anniversary, first year of operations, and trying to support the athletes that obviously are on the UFC roster. That's about 560 athletes globally. About half of those live in the US. About 20 of them live in Vegas itself. So it's truly a decentralized program, decentralized approach to athlete services and support. But ultimately, the ambition is to provide, access for UFC fighters to world-class facilities and world-class expertise in the fields of nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports science, physical therapy, and medical, so that ultimately we can give the athletes a platform to optimize their performance and manage their health and well-being, but also to shape best practice within the sport so that we can have somewhat of an impact on the evolution of the sport of MMA moving forward. It's obviously, in comparison to a lot of other sports, it's quite a young sport. We've only been a professional sport for 25 years in the format of the UFC. So still a lot of information and insights is needed. And when you compare it to things like soccer, rugby, baseball, American football, basketball, tennis, that have been around a lot longer and have much more clear awareness of how you succeed in those sports. So yeah, ultimately that's what the Performance Institute is. We're trying to evolve the sport and accelerate the standards at which athletes are performing at. And my role within that is I'm the Vice President of Performance, the UFC Performance Institute. So I essentially, my role is very varied, but I direct and manage the performance team in all the respective disciplines that I mentioned previously. But primarily, I'm directing and managing the strategy of how we're going to work with athletes, how we're going to support athletes and their coaches and their respective teams, and drive the culture of what we're going to do here from a philosophical perspective, but also service provision to the athletes. And any given day, my days are very different. Sometimes I'm sat at my desk, as I say, managing strategy and trying to come up with innovative ways to shape what we're doing. Other days I'm on the strength, weight room floor, acting as a coach or delivering, S&C workouts, or other times doing diagnostics and work in the lab, and everything through to then connecting with the executives and the hierarchy of the UFC. So pretty varied.
Like saying about the data and probably about what it takes to win. What are the kind of physiological demands of mixed martial arts? I know it's a very varied sport, different styles, different weight categories. How do you go about defining what it takes to win for different athletes?
Yeah, that's the that's the golden bullet right now for this sport. And I think what's unique about MMA, let's take rugby or American football, or soccer even, if you're a particular position in a given sport like that, there's very specific attributes that allow you to do that position well. And it means that those attributes are different to other positions on the field. So if I'm a wide receiver in American football, what I need to do is clearly defined. It's very different to a running back, or a defensive back. The thing about MMA is that you need to do all of that. We are truly the decathlon of combat sport. No disrespect to yourself, Dan, because you're doing great stuff, but boxing is one component of what our guys need. It's not just boxing and striking, So that herein lies the challenge, is just trying to define what the respective qualities of the sport are. The other component is that we're weight classification sport. So there's obviously differences, which I can chat about here in a moment, between the respective weight classes in how you win fights. We've also got, different styles and the background and the styles that fighters come to and then your opponent, how you win a fight based on your opponent's skill set. So, you know, it's a real challenge. And then the overarching piece of that is, listen, you're fighting with, you know, spandex on and you know, very little clothing. We don't wear footwear. So in terms of wearable technology that some of these other sports can aggregate real clear physiological insights through intrinsic or extrinsic load monitoring, be it physiological monitoring or physical monitoring, we've not been able to do that. No one's been able to capture that right now in competition because of the nature of the fight, right? So what I will say is that now, you know, we've got some pretty strong data analytics, you know, if in terms of just understanding how fights are won. So, you know, about 59% of heavyweight fights are won by knockout, and it's about 21.3% for flyweights. So you've got, you know, pretty much a linear relationship in knockouts. Same time, if you look at decisions, about 25% of heavyweight fights go to decision, about 57% of flyweights go to decision. And then submissions sit right around 20% for all of our weight classes. So straight away, by taking out those kind of just simple metrics, you can start deciding, all right, how am I preparing a fighter for a fight, you know? And it comes back to ultimately how you win the fight. Now we're starting to get into some more, you know, deeper multivariate and collinearity of analytics to start looking at, you know, how are different techniques and tactics winning fights. So, you know, if you look at every weight class, there's about a relationship of about 0.85 in terms of significant strikes landed is always the first defining success variable. So we have a striking component that is the default thing which happens first in terms of potential success. If you then look at things like takedown success, that's about 0.69 relationship in terms of winning and losing. So, you know, if you've got a better takedown success record, you're going to have more chance of winning. But the irony is, if you look at takedowns attempted, for males, that ranks about 19th in terms of importance of different variables for winning a fight. If you look at females, that's the third most important variable. So even between different genders that we have, you know, these different components take different priority in terms of how athletes are ultimately winning fights and the dynamics of the fight. So, you know, if, you know, in a light heavyweight fight, I've got this number, you know, about 1.8 significant ground strikes per minute, you've got a 91% chance of winning the fight. Well, if you're going to have that many ground strikes, number one, you've got to be on top of someone. Number two, you've got to be on the ground. And number three, you've got to be in the right position to deliver those significant strikes. So there's a process to that as well. So I guess the caveat to what I'm saying is that we're really now starting to understand what it takes to win, how athletes can win in the respective weight classes and sports. And that's totally driven by looking at statistical analytics and coding the fights. We use about 167 different variables per fight that our statisticians essentially code. And then we can drop that into understanding, you know, frequencies and commonalities in the fight that we can now say, all right, that's something I can take. If it's a female fighter and takedowns attempted is really important to the success, then ultimately I should be working on that. You know, might need to prioritize it above a technical attribute or a tactical attribute that sits lower in that ranking. Now, if a technical coach is going to do that, there's now a physical, psychological, organizational strategy that complements it. You know, so if my fighter is going to be training more takedown techniques, more wrestling takedowns, you know, what's the physical attributes that underpin that I can now build a strength and conditioning program to support it. So I guess what I'm saying is, listen, in the first 9 months, we've absolutely been collecting a ton of cross-sectional physiological data where we're starting to understand normal distribution for world-class MMA fighters, not amateur to pros or, you know, a small group of 7 or 8 pros. We're talking hundreds of world-class MMA fighters and looking at what's the normal distribution in those guys. so that we're going to be pushing that content out, around our 12th month mark here, and that's going to hopefully, really give some insights to the sport. But what we're doing in parallel with the cross-sectional norms from a physiological perspective is also looking at that what it takes to win question, because ultimately everything from a physiological development perspective has to make sense based on that roadmap I was talking about. Is how do you win the freaking fight? Because that's the most important thing.
Well, that's say that it's only 9 months in, fantastic understanding of the sport, and I'm excited to see this data coming out.
Yeah, we're excited too.
It is really difficult to find, especially in combat sports, like saying they can't wear wearable devices, you can't take lactates in between a fight and everything like that. So it's hard to see the exact detailed physiological responses. So something that we pride ourselves on at Boxing Science is our testing battery to find out like kind of whether they're strong, explosive, whether they how fit they are as well. And we've tested like quite a lot of amateur boxers and professional boxers. We haven't got hundreds of elite fighters. But what are your go-to tests across different physiological demands, and what kind of scores do you think that you can expect from that? And what does a MMA athlete look like when they first walk into the gym?
Yeah, well, that's a loaded question. Multiple.
I went on then.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I mean, listen, we're blessed, don't take it for granted that we're working with, an elite population, and we've got, power in our statistics because we've got large sample populations. We take that on the most individual level though. All of our programming, all of our strategies is directed by limitations. There's a lot of training dogma in combat sports. I'm sure you see the same thing in boxing. When I was with Taekwondo, I saw it. Now I'm in MMA, I see it. I just think there's a lot of training dogma that we need to get over a little bit, and everyone's got to have a concerted effort to try and be a little bit more strategic about what they're doing. So often that philosophy is about athletes fitting into a given program, and it should be the other way around. The program should be shaped to facilitate the athlete development, not here's my strength program, you're going to follow it. It's about, all right, how do we build a performance strategy that is aligned to optimizing an athlete's strengths, because MMA is a sport that has not been necessarily taken over by the great generalist. With the exceptionist of GSP and some others like that, you'll still see specific skill sets are huge attributes in the sport. So we're still a sport that's polarized by specialist skills. Be it great jiu-jitsu or be it huge striking potential. Those skills still, those attributes still predominate. It's not like that we're seeing people that have truly, equal skills across the board. So that being said, you want to take that attribute and you want to make your strength a super strength, and you've got to direct your programming and your planning to make sure that the attribute which has got the athlete to where they are right now is always emphasized and developed. But then because we are a decathlon of combat skills, what we try to do is direct all of our programming against raising limitations, because then we just lift the whole thing rather than saying, all right, we're just going to continue working on component A or B. Do you know what I mean? So that's where our diagnostics is so crucial to what we're trying to do. So, it's about plotting that into a strategy. Again, periodization and long-term strategy is something that's not done really well in this sport. There's an 8-week fight camp, 8 to 10 week fight camp philosophy, rather than a 52-week fight camp philosophy. And as you well know, some of these physiological and physical attributes simply can't be achieved within an 8-week turnaround, let alone getting everything else that you're trying to get in a fight camp. So, we need money in the bank, and we need to put things into the savings off camp, and we've got to understand the value of doing that. In terms of, our testing and our diagnostics, listen, we've got strength power battery that we put together. We try and, look at the force velocity curve and the respective data that is out there from boxing and research from boxing and karate and taekwondo and use some of those. There are significant differences in the way MMA fighters strike to some of the other sports. That tends to be based on their stance and their body position, because we've also got to do takedown maneuvers and ground-based grappling maneuvers. So the stance is a little bit different. So that affects striking mechanics. But that being said, there's still we still need to understand the unique neuromuscular capabilities, and then obviously the maximal strength capabilities, so we can look relative to maximal strength. So we do everything from drop jumps and counter movement jumps on force plates, and using the force plate, I can take a single jump and get 14 different metrics that we really measure and monitor off a single jump. We'll do loaded speed squats, so we can look at building power curves to understand at what resistance and at what speed are athletes optimizing their power output, so that we can now strategically plan velocity-based training against optimizing power curves. We do that for upper and lower body with different parameters. We'll use an isometric mid-thigh pull just as a way to gain true diagnostics in a static pull. And again, we're getting 10 different metrics off a single isometric pull. On the other side, the conditioning side, the flip side of it, then we'll look at a variety of things from conditioning. The old adage that fights aren't won because you're not strong enough. They're won because you're better conditioned. So it's a huge part of what we do as well. So we'll do, we'll look at a lot of ventilatory thresholds, some lactate thresholds. So we'll do some, lactate assessment. So we actually get accurate biological feedback, and we can measure those thresholds and align training strategies to those thresholds. There's, you look at the literature, and there's 2 different sides, 3 different sides of the fence, but invariably ventilatory thresholds, lactate thresholds in trained athletes tend to happen in somewhat similar places. So we'll compare and contrast both our biological and our ventilatory data, make sure it's telling us the same thing. Listen, we'll do that in certain max tests. We do have an interest just in terms of what maximal aerobic capabilities are, because everything is relative to a maximum. So if those respective thresholds are shifting closer to a maximum, then obviously we can understand that we're affecting both those anaerobic power and anaerobic capacity capabilities. And then we'll do various kind of anaerobic power tests, be it lower body and upper body erg power tests, to see, explosive anaerobic capabilities, and then anaerobic capacity tests too. So listen, we've got quite a portfolio of performance diagnostics that we implement. And then on top of that, we also have nutritional diagnostics, everything from DEXA and gold standard body composition through to metabolic efficiency tests, where we're looking at long progressive treadmill work to understand the crossover point between fat utilization and carbohydrate utilization. So again, we can accurately pinpoint what kind of intensities athletes need to be working at to really optimize their weight descents for weight classification. So long-winded answer, I apologize. But ultimately, again, it comes back to directing all of our training against limitations. So we roll out a portfolio of diagnostics with each athlete so that we can then have complete understanding of where their respective limitations sit. And now we can have a really powerful and intentional conversation about what that athlete needs to improve on, rather than the guesswork that goes on in terms of, I think they need to be stronger, or they need to be able to tolerate lactate more, or whatever, without obviously evidence to support that.
That's brilliant. I'm going to finish off with one more question, but I wanted to for you to finish off the workshop. So before I ask the question, I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
No worries, man, anytime.
Yeah, it's been an excellent workshop, giving people an excellent insight into how the Ufc Performance Institute is going about the business, how to kind of manage such a massive project. And a lot of these coaches and trainers that are going to be watching this, they're going to be at the start of their career or within the first 5 years of their career. So kind of it might take them 10, 15, 20 years to get into position to put all these things in place that you've enlightened us to. What is your number one advice to a young trainer, strength and conditioning coach, and in how they should kind of progress their career?
Yeah. Stay humble and stay hungry is a phrase I always use. Now, listen, I'm blessed in my career and I've got to where I am, and I'd never take it for granted on any day-to-day basis. But at the same time, I've been in the trenches, and when I was first starting out, I busted my tail and I did what I could to get ahead. You know, be a good person is always the first thing. You know, if people resonate to people, you know, and you know, if you do things right in the right fashion and you're a good person, it's crucial in this industry because we don't forget. It's not a massively, you know, you tend to know who people are, or at least you'll know by 6 degrees of separation someone that does know them, and it'll come back and bite you in the ass if you're not a good guy. So, you know, be humble, understand, you know, whether you're a nutritionist, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a strength and conditioning coach, you're not the answer to all their problems as an athlete. You know, these guys could do perfectly well without you, but we do know that if they do have you on their team, the potential to improve what they're doing or to complement it is huge. So don't get ahead of yourself and think that you're the, you know, Johnny Big Bollocks because you're the strength coach or you're trying to be the strength coach with athlete X, Y, or Z. So, you know, be a good person, be humble, and have a humility to what you're doing. But be hungry and have an absolute commitment and desire that if you want to be a strength and conditioning coach, whatever level or whichever sport or whichever population of athlete that you want to work with, you'll get a lot of doors slammed in your face. You know, there's a lot of people wanting to do the same thing. You've got to be thick-skinned, you've got to be resilient, and you've got to have an undying desire to understand that's what you want to do. So, you know, stick with it, stick with your guns, network and find the right people to connect with and to talk to. But yeah, that's kind of my advice, I guess, is be humble and hungry, because you got to have a desire to influence change, your own change as a coach and development of you as a coach, but also the development of your athletes, whatever level. If it's Joe Blow in the street, if it's your mum or your gran, or if it's an athlete that's actually competing at regional, county, or a high level, you know, you've got to invest your time to improve them. And again, it is, I don't want to say you're servant to the athlete, because, you know, sometimes athletes need guidance. But at the same time, you've got to understand your position in the bigger scheme of things. So, you know, I wish everyone good luck. We're all trying to get ahead in the world. You know, I keep pushing and I keep trying to be a better person every day. I want to continue to grow in my profession, and I understand that there's people just getting started out there. But you know, do what you can, and it will happen if you keep the faith, let's say.